Greetings, fellow wanderers of this warp-torn universe, and today I'm broadcasting across the synaptic waves from the far reaches to bring you a bit of a stat check video. This Space Hulk has been all abuzz after the Emperor's Children release, trying to find suitable conversions for models, trying to power through the paint process to be tournament and casual ready on the quick. And I would consider them eye-catching, well, maybe eye-assaulting, like performing an eye-based B&E. And I think the collection so far is presentable. I still have a few things in the wings, but I've had a thought. It might be fun, for some at least. It might be redundant, but we finally have access to the Demon Primarch Fulgrim in a 40k setting. Stats, rules, all of it. I kind of want to put him through some paces, run some scenarios, debate his usefulness, because as many have pointed out, if you're going to take Fulgrim, take two Mauler Fiends instead. More bodies, more damage potential, similar durability, but I don't know. Despite my love of fluff lists stabbing me in the back in the competitive scene, I kind of don't mind a supersized distraction Carnifex with some odd behaviors attached. And I kind of wonder, how does he stack up against some odd combos? Some heavy artillery, some wild army rule and detachment damage in a box combos. Hell, maybe even some named champions he may come across on the battlefield. At least some of the ones I have on hand. But most of all, how does the newest addition to the Pantheon Legions stack up to his brothers? Let's take a look at the data. Stat line wise, he's pretty on par with most of his brothers. Movement is in the upper end, only Magnus with a specific active aura can keep up. Similar toughness to all but Mortarion, that still holds the Walking Mega Tank award. The commonplace 2-4 save line, as well as equal wounds, leadership, and OC. The movement plays into the army rule quite well, allowing Fulgrim to take full advantage of advance and charge, or even blending with the fly ability to fall back over top of a squad and find prey further in. The similar level of toughness to most is refreshing. I was a bit worried they would push him too far into fast glass cannon and make it a toughness 10 instead of that sweet toughness 11 breakpoint. Likewise, the wound count being similar is just noise. When you consider this raw stat comparison to the other current Demon Primarchs, 385 points feels about right compared to the current 465 of Magnus, 435 of Angron. The 300 point Mortarion still holds the spot for cheapest bang for buck. That's what he gets for being a bit on the slow end, I suppose. All stats and endurance. Weapon selection for Fulgrim also sits in a melee leaning focus, but not as much as Angron with his 0 ranged weapons. The Malefic Lash is certainly not as strong as Magnus's ranged options, but it comes with a connection to an ability we'll talk about in a second. And honestly, he is only a stone's throw in quality from Mortarion with the general damage output. More of a solid attack number and damage line versus the casino function of Morty's Rotwind, just with less keywords. Melee though, it's a bit arguable. Despite being the duelist of the quadrumvirate, he technically attacks less than most. Sort of. Those extra attacks do help push his sweeping attack profile to be easily better than Mortarion's, but when you consider the RNGesus level of damage from the anti-heavy profile versus Morty's flat 4 damage, the fact that both Magnus and Angron 2x bracket for toughness 8 models versus Fulgrim 2xing toughness 7, tack on Magnus's +1 to wound aura for his own anti-fodder and armor profiles, it's less that Fulgrim fits in a dominant position overall here. These stats lean this perfect snake bat into dealing mostly with Space Marine tier elite squads mildly effectively with its 2 damage on the sweep, while also having the dice quantity to punch through unending hordes thanks to the tail attack. Much of the melee prowess Fulgrim will receive comes from the detachment options. Got some demons nearby? The Carnival gives most of his profiles sustain 1 on 5s. Did he charge? Well, Peerless Bladesman will allow you to take lethals on top of sustain. Coterie and Chosen can provide some reroll potentials. You can even upgrade his survivability or reroll potential with 1 point cost commands in almost all detachments. So there is a bit of playstyle adaptability here. Now, core rules wise, he does only bear the common Deadly Demise and Deep Strike, no bonus of pre-game movement or Feel No Pain. And because of how most of these stats line up, the army rule allowing him to advance or fall back and still shoot and charge makes this model a tough aggressor to pin down, basically the anti-tar pit. And the key element that makes Fulgrim stand out in general combat is his poisoning ability, although there is a bit of a conceptual problem with it. In your shooting phase or the fight phase, which is worded like either fight phase, unclear, you select one unit you targeted with attacks. All you need to have done is hit the target. Any damage is just a bonus. That target is marked with a poison check, so maybe get some tokens for this. That is both yours and your enemy's command phases, checks must be made for all marked units to see if they take D3 mortals. This is the classic 50-50 4+. GW will probably have to clarify if the poison status remains if attached units die, leaving characters alone, but I do believe his buffs and effects fall off with the loss of the attached unit, so too would these poison tokens. This makes for an odd concept. The Thrill Seeker's army rule allows all Emperor's Children units with this ability to shoot and charge after a fallback or advance, with caveats. They cannot target units they were within engagement range of at the top of the turn, and they can't target a unit that was recently targeted by another. Stick with me. So if this refractor falls back from an enemy, it can shoot and charge a different unit so long as no one else has touched them in the same phase. This is about sequencing, which means the refractor can shoot something, and another squad that didn't advance or fall back can also shoot it. Then, in the charge phase, the refractor can charge first before the unit that didn't advance charges the same target. All timing. The method of poisoning, tied in with Fulgrim's speed and desire to fall back and recharge into other things, will require a bit of thinking to ensure you don't want to target units Fulgrim seeks to poison and or kill with other Emperor's Children units that also needed to advance or fall back. It creates a sort of slaughter ballet. Probably not too much of an issue, as Fulgrim's distraction potential should have him in the backline by turn 2, while the Emperor's Children cleanup crew is sweeping in behind him. Swappable abilities though, I'm not super stoked with these. They are very selfish, which is very flavorful. Firstly, the aura is chosen in your opponent's command phase. This might seem weird, but honestly, getting first turn initiative isn't really going to see too much of a detriment to not having a Primarch ability active. The one that probably would matter is the defensive option, giving Fulgrim a -1 to hit on incoming attacks, basically a stealth that works in melee. Triggering the fight's first ability could be useful to force enemies to want to fall back potentially, as well as the potential for defending against incoming enemy models. Lastly, the only group benefit aura is a 6-inch range that causes enemies that seek to fall back to have to take a leadership check. Not a battle shock, let's be clear. They will still be able to use commands and anything else. They'll just have to remain stationary. Good when you're trying to avoid ridiculously powerful blast weapons, but this is just a leadership test. On average, leaving Fulgrim's survivability up to a 2d6 roll feels a little rough. If there are enough targets with low enough leadership in range, maybe it's fine against horde armies. Lastly, Fulgrim does bracket in much the same way as his brothers. Falling to 6 wounds will slightly restrict his lethality. So, second cheapest as of right now, statted in a kind of middling Primarch fashion. Not a ton of army-specific benefits, just a distractionary beat stick meant to avoid too much recompense, while cleansing enemy backlines. Personally, where I feel he is weakest is in comparison to what many in the army seem focused on. He lacks the precision keyword for his attacks, probably with good reason. I just felt it would have been on brand to specifically hunt for leaders out of squads, although maybe that falls more to Lucius. I guess I'll just have to keep in mind the one command point epic challenge function. Could be very useful to cut down on certain squad combos. Thinking in terms of parking lot stat battles can be fun, but let's apply some concepts with some dice rolling. So an issue all Primarchs have is their girth, their footprint. On most competitive map layouts, there may be 2 spots in total on each board half where they can hide from most angles. So something like Fulgrim might get hit with a bit of ranged potential. Now, my collection isn't vast, but I have some fun concepts he might get hit with. Let's start with one of my favorites, a Forge Fiend. Not just any Forge Fiend, Soul Forged, fully souped up. Hellbrute nearby for sustained and lethal packs, enhanced with the Soul Forged pack for +1 to wound rolls, tempting addendum from a nearby Warpsmith for full hit rerolls, +1 to hit from the Warpsmith's buff, Vashdor nearby providing the strength buff it needs to equal Fulgrim's defense. We'll say for the sake of argument that Fulgrim has cover, as most things in 40k his size tend to at times, and that will be the case for pretty much all of these ranged functions. We'll also say he is sporting the -1 to hit ability. We'll leave the rest of the commands out of this. Just keep in mind that some detachments could allow Fulgrim to push the minus to hit further, negating the Warpsmith buff. Either way, 3d3 attacks from plasma cannons. Even though technically the efficiency of the autocannons is supposedly a bit better, this is what we are doing. Hitting on 3s after pluses and minuses, full rerolls with lethal and sustain, wounding on 3s after the strength equalizer and +1 to wound from Soul Forged Pact, devs on 6s, AP 3 down to 2 from cover, which matters not as it's still Fulgrim's invulnerable. Let the dice roll tests commence! I'm only going to do a small selection here of rolls, and keep in mind, bigger or smaller swings can occur in your own games, but this Forge Fiend's performance, even with all the bonuses, ended up being subpar. I once killed a Norn emissary with 2 Forge Fiends without any of these buffs, but over 4 sequences of rolls, Fulgrim only took more than 10 damage from a single spike roll at the end, that one being 15 instead of the 3, 6, and 9 from the prior attempts. 15 wounds does bracket, but doesn't kill, leaving him on 1, which is certainly a solid feat. For the hell of it, I also rolled for the dual autocannon single plasma build, considered to be a better damage output. Sadly, the AP1 negated by cover meant that Fulgrim got his 2+ against the autocannon shots, and a spike roll could only do 8 damage. Consider the brick though. Without any of these nearby units, the Hellbrute, Vashdor, the Warpsmith, none of this would have been as easy, even within the Soul Forged detachment. Next up, from the long-range pile, I once one-shot a monolith with this thing. Granted, the roll was spiked so hard. A Chaos Knight Desecrator, designed to destroy monsters and vehicles, albeit in a bit of a gambling fashion. Unlike the Soul Forged Forge Fiend, no stacking buffs here, just raw power. Due to Fulgrim's monster nature, its Desecrator Laser Destructor will benefit from the devastating wounds function. A big weakness for Fulgrim when unaided by the feel no pain potential that comes from a specific detachment. Only 3 attacks, but hitting on 3s after Fulgrim's defensive ability. Wounding on 3s from its Strength 18 profile. Enough AP to bring Fulgrim to his invulnerable regardless of cover, and the potential of d6 + 3 wounds from each failure, and any devastating roll. Roll it out! And by the gods, my first 2 rolls provided a glimpse into the oddity of my rolling with this hyper elite las cannon. The first 2 sequences end up only putting devs on the board. 14 for the first, 8 for the second. Brutal, but all things have a time and place, and the second 2 rolls ended in no devs and 2 lucky invulns, fully negating incoming damage. The Desecrator is my favorite of the gambling guns. Its spikiness really does push the limits between laughable and horrifying, but still, high score goes to the 15 damage from the Forge Fiend. I have a hankering for something a little less in general potential. Not necessarily something to shrug off, but still, my birds, Kairos, and 2 Lords of Change, Laser Chickens, the core of my current scintillating Legion list, because I don't own Soul Grinders. Not the best ranged counter to something like Fulgrim, as they basically have this turn alone to drop him before suddenly having issues. But with both Bolts of Change set to lethal, as the strength enhancement from their aura isn't enough to overcome toughness 11, and Kairos set to possibly assist with some damage saturation, we'll see how this fares, as the points total of all 3 of these enemy assailants is a bit more vast than Fulgrim. Reminder in general, from range, I am considering Fulgrim to be in cover. His base and model are large enough that yes, he'll probably always be visible, but at the very least cover is pretty easy to come by, and the birds do as I expected. It is a bunch of dice due to the quantity of birds, but even with all the RNG potential, the Lords of Change are hitting on 3s and wounding on 5s. Fulgrim still gets a 3+ save against them. Kairos is much the same, but with a slightly better AP. But all the birds suffer from the game of D3 damage. Doesn't matter how good you roll at first, rolling all ones in the end is a bit rough. All said and done, they only mustered 11, 9, 7, and 6 damage, as though they were getting tired. I do hope one day the birds feel a bit stronger, at least more of a threat that aligns with their cost. Moving into the close range, I kind of want to see how the would-be leader of the Chaos Legion is able to stand against a fully demoned out Primarch. Abaddon, the War Master, Dark Pacted for sustains with full hit rerolls set for his heavy unit breaking Demon Blade to fish for devs. Can't make a save against mortals. The trick here is that Abaddon doesn't normally come with fights first, so conceptually, he would have to resist a wave of combat from Fulgrim regardless. And keep in mind that even though he will be bodyguardless here, a simple play of Epic Challenge could potentially peel this Terminator-clad combatant out of a squad. So, first, let's test his durability. We're going to avoid the idea of Fulgrim shooting his melee target. We'll write it off as a plan to spread his poison more. But even with melee only, Abaddon crumples under the weight of this serpent. 12 damage, 12 damage, 11 damage, you get the picture. Again, this is raw. There are detachments and stratagems that could push both of these aggressors in strength or endurance, so results may vary, but barring any potential death leading up to the clash, the clapback from the Demon Sword could be strong here, similar in many ways to the Desecrator Laser Destructor, but small and slashy, and with a slightly lower damage potential. Let's see how it fares against a Fulgrim, who we will consider tagged with his Fight's First ability as to be defensive against an Abaddon charge, so no reduction to hit, just all raw stats. Again, fishing for sustains from the pack to increase the dev potential. Easy enough when hitting on 2s and wounding on 3s normally. The opener didn't do well and still chipped 9 damage. The second attempt, however, exploded for 18. That's a dead Fulgrim. The follow-up 2 attempts ended in 6 damage, but only due to a solid armor spike roll from Fulgrim. The War Master can certainly stand toe-to-toe with Fulgrim, but only if he can't rip him out of his bodyguard first. Lastly, among some of my non-Primarch options, I want to see Fulgrim fare against his comparison point, the Mauler Fiend. As we talked about, many have said just to take 2 of them instead, and honestly, their logic is sound. That's 260 points for the pair to Fulgrim's 385. We'll even say that this Mauler Fiend I use for my Soulforged will run at the same statting as an Emperor's Children variant, so no bonus from packs, no extra attacks, slightly less tough than Fulgrim, slightly slower in speed, and lack of fly keeps it from passing over enemies for recharges into other squads, but these are more meant to menace objectives, be obnoxious. We'll even throw in some Lasher tendrils for possible chip. First though, let's see how a Fulgrim with Fights First counters a charging Mauler Fiend. Overall, the durability does show. Fulgrim on his first attempt does pull out 11 damage, which is 1 away from death, but only 6, 8, and 4 afterwards. Much of this has to do with the d6 plus 1 damage on Fulgrim's strike attack. The dice gods giveth, and they taketh. Next, again, barring all potential damage bracketing, the clapback. Hitting on 3s as Fulgrim could be set to Fights First here, but there is always potential to force those to 4s depending on situation. Wounding on 3s from strength 14, knocking Fulgrim to his invuln, and rolling the d6 plus 1 gamble. Let's take a peek. 0 damage, 6 damage, 0 damage, 4 damage. Pathetic. But I wouldn't necessarily say that this is the true point of the Mauler Fiend. At their attacks quantity and hit rate, they tend to be there to finish off weakened vehicles or monsters, mostly to rip Space Marine tier units to shreds. And remember, there would be at least 2 of them, or even 1 and a couple squads of other stuff. The value would be more placed on getting objectives and missions done and not really caring about the big angry snake monster now. And this is a big one for me. I always thought that when I returned to the universe of 40k, if the Emperor's Children were released, that would be my army of choice. I love the links to creativity, even if the warning is against those who seek it at all cost. I was 2 years too early, so my old love, the Thousand Sons, were my main choice. And Magnus was quite the Primarch to come back to. almost integral to the strategy and machinations of the K-Sons, devastating in all things, and in 10th, statted to be extremely powerful, at least within the only detachment they provided at first. We will be avoiding detachment benefits here. I only utilized the Soulforge specifically, as that is a path I fully understand for damage spiking. Here, it is just a battle between brothers, intellect that gave way to ego, creative enrichment that gave way to vanity. Firstly, a volley of ranged from the psychic artillery of Magnus. Fulgrim still using his size to always be just kind of in cover. Let us see the series of results from this hailstorm of warp power. Fulgrim has to contend with the devastating potential of the 3d3 attack profile, but without the boon of full rerolls and giving devastating to the blast attack as well. Magnus is hard-pressed to do a ton of work, maxing out at 9 damage from a solid wound roll, but otherwise hitting for 6, 3, and nothing. These attacks are usually more of a finishing option against some vehicles, and more designed to clear Space Marines out in the open. Not the best, but not bad. Magnus would not be able to lure his brother around the field while still attacking. That 24-inch range isn't safe against Fulgrim's 16-inch movement and potential for advance before striking. A roll of a 6 leaves an unfailable 2-inch charge on a flat surface from 24 inches. Combat is inevitable, as nothing Fulgrim swings with is considered psychic. Magnus would seek to reduce the damage of all incoming attacks by 1, limiting the strike profile to the d6 gamble. And as Magnus comes with a passive increase of hit and wound rolls by 1, nothing Fulgrim carries on his own would be able to lower incoming attack potential. So attacking first would be easy enough. Let's see if he can lay Magnus low. Over the 4 attack rolls, it is clear that a 4+ invulnerable when tied to -1 damage is just strong. The full might of Fulgrim's swings does less than Magnus's shooting. 5 damage reduced to 3, 3 to 2, nothing, and 7 after reductions. Again, a lot of this has to do with the nature of d6 damage. The highs feel great, but the lows are life-altering. Maybe try and save a command point for big impacts like this. If Tzeentch's machinations play out as they did and Magnus gets to attack at full force, could it be enough to strike down the Serpent, sending him back to seek weaker prey? The +1 to hit and wound aura really helps out here, and the attack has great potential for mortals with that devastating rule. The trick is you have to roll those 6s. The first batch did put up 12 damage from this, but all subsequent ones, thanks to Fulgrim's 4+ invulnerable, limited the damage to 6. So the leader of my main collection still feels more durable and more consistent with damage. Of course, that comes at quite the point cost increase. As for the other brothers, I did roll through to see the results. Mortarion lived up to his namesake as the best of damage sponges. I considered the aura to reduce weapon and ballistic skill, as that will probably be the best option into Emperor's Children. And since his personal ability to avoid modifiers circumvents the -1 to hit, there wasn't much use in Fulgrim using that. At best, Fulgrim put 13 damage on the board, having it reduced to 10. And then, weirdly, a bunch of 7s. 2 that were reduced to 6, 1 that started its life as a 9 and was reduced to 7. Strange. Mortarion's melee clapback led to 2 8s, a 4, and nothing. Even with the 2 up to hit and lethals, 5 attacks just does not bode well in melee. Last on the family reunion list, it's Angron. And if I'm not mistaken, G-Dubs said Fulgrim fared quite well into him. Let's see from my small slice of the dice rolling pie. Fulgrim swinging first leads to about average damage into large durable targets thanks to the d6 damage spike, topping out at 10, snagging 2 9s and a 6. Decent finisher damage, but Angron, well, 8 attacks, hitting on 2s, which could be cut to 3s, but we're doing the fights first thing here, just to concept it out. And either way, Angron would probably go full hit rerolls, so there's that. Wounding on 3s, like any other Primarch outside of Magnus, but d6 plus 2 damage. Let me check my notes. 21 damage, 22 damage, 17 damage, and thanks to a miracle roll of saves, 4 damage. For the experiment, that gives Angron the high score. Good for you, buddy. Welp, when compared to the rest of the Pantheon, Fulgrim is definitely so-so. Wouldn't quite consider him bottom tier thanks to that speed he's packing, but the lack of team assistance and spiky damage profile makes it hard to consider him as anything more than just a fun distraction. A distraction whose sole purpose seems to be staying alive and mobile for at least 3 turns, chucking shots and melee into targets it can either kill or leave poisoned, maybe against lower leadership teams, even tie down a squad in combat. Is he worth it? Outside of Rule of Cool, I'd say meta-slaves should steer clear. He has his niche, and the Emperor's Children detachments do play into him a bit, like the Demons from the Carnival giving him sustain on 5, the Chosen detachment giving him wound rerolls, the Mercurial allowing him to reroll advance rolls and even gain the -1 to hit if he is currently using something else, even access to table edge uppy downy. When viewed outside of detachments, most Primarchs feel fairly strong, but no one feels more like an unfinished painting without them like Fulgrim does. Playing into him, dev wounds are certainly king. Even saturation from decent AP weapons will probably be enough. But if you, the Emperor's Children player, can sate your bloodlust a little, recognize that Fulgrim is also a 16-inch movement powerhouse that can fulfill side missions mildly easily. You saw that he could shred Abaddon with just the boon of Epic Challenge, and fights first is always an option on the table. Most scary squads are the way they are due to leaders they carry. For 1 command point, you could drastically reduce a squad's kill potential, only to leave them behind in the following turn. I will personally be using this monster, but I feel the path I plan on chiseling out for him won't feel that epic. Might even end up being 300 points worth of 16-inch movement action monkey work. A bit easier to justify with Fulgrim versus Magnus, who feels like if he goes around without shooting, you've wasted almost a quarter of your army in points. But what do you think of Fulgrim? Any odd plans or combos those of you out there that have access to the Emperor's Children's Tome of Knowledge might have sussed out? Or is the goal still to focus on using him as the distraction Carnifex he seems to be? Let us know in the comments below, and if you want to continue the conversation, we do have a community Discord linked in the description. Join up, show off projects, ask rules questions, debate possible tactics. We'd be happy to have you. As always, likes for the like god and subscribes for the subscribe throne. I am Primarchs, and I'll see you in the next one.